Hello everybody, this is Professor Paul Hicks talking to you about philosophy again. Today we're going to talk about Plato's dialogue, the Crito. Here we see Socrates after he's been sentenced to death and he happens to be in prison. But there happens to be a festival where the city elders are at, and so they can't put him to death right now, and they have to wait until these elders actually get back. And so he's sitting in his prison cell, he's asleep, his friend Crito happens to walk in, he lets Socrates sleep, eventually Socrates wakes up, and he's asking, why did you not just wake me up? And Crito said he wanted Socrates to be at peace when he was asleep, because he thinks that it'd be so horrible that you have to think about this death sentence and stuff like that and being in prison, so might as well let you just stay asleep. Socrates, of course, thinks that's absurd, and he's perfectly at peace with himself, and he doesn't care about this type of stuff. So, the Crito is really an extension of Socrates' view of justice. Specifically, he argues that we cannot answer injustice with justice, no matter what. We cannot answer injustice with more injustice. No matter what the consequences are, one must always be just. So Crito is a wealthy friend of Socrates. Socrates had a lot of wealthy friends, even though he himself was not wealthy. And Crito comes to Socrates and says, look, we've paid off all the guards. We set you up to go live your life in another city, and you're going to be perfectly fine. We've got it all taken care of. Socrates, all you got to do is walk out of this prison and you'll be free. And Crito gives a few reasons why he thinks Socrates should escape. Number one, he says Socrates is endangering the good reputation of his friends. And if Socrates is executed, Crito will appear to, say, honor money over the friends. He will be thought of that one must respect the opinions of the many because they can bring about great evils. So what would happen if he doesn't escape? When everybody knows that his rich friends could have gotten him out, they were going to think, well, his rich friends really weren't friends at all, and they didn't help Socrates, and so that would bring about a bad reputation to the friends. And he says, Socrates, do you want to cause bad reputations to your friends? Another reason he thinks that Socrates should escape is that Socrates should not worry about the risks his friends are running to try to get him out. Don't worry about it. We've got it taken care of. Third reason is Socrates should not worry about the amount of money needed for the escape attempt, because there's people staying in Athens that have brought a lot of money just for the very purpose of saving Socrates' life. Another reason is that he says Socrates has support in other cities. He says you could go to Thessaly, and exile will not be a bad option, and you can live out your life perfectly happy. Another reason, he says, Socrates, you'd be unjustly joining the efforts of your enemies. You would be choosing the easiest path instead of the courageous, honorable, and virtuous path, which Crito feels is to flee from the certain unjust death. But Socrates would be acting unjustly by not fulfilling his parental obligations. And so he says, Crito says to Socrates, he says, you can't die. You have kids. Who's going to raise your kids? Somebody's got to take care of your kids. Right? Think about your family, Socrates. And he says, Socrates, you would not be acting cowardly by not resisting injustices, implying, of course, that the court's decision of Socrates' subsequent execution are unjust. So those are some reasons that Crito gives to Socrates for why Socrates should escape. Socrates, of course, doesn't think these reasons are very good. And he says, Socrates argues that even in my current situation, I cannot abandon the principles that I've always lived on. I can't abandon being just now just because I happen to be in a bad situation. He says, quote, I cannot now reject the very principles that I previously adopted just because this fate has overtaken me. Rather, they appear to me much the same as ever, and I respect and honor the same ones that I did before. If we cannot find better ones to maintain in the present situation, you can be sure that I won't agree with you, not even if the power of the populace threatens us like children with more bogeymen than it does now, by visiting us with imprisonment, execution, or confiscation of property. So Socrates begins by stating he's always held a principle in regards to respecting the opinion of others. He says that one should have a high regard for some opinions held by human beings, but not others. So think about that. Is everybody's opinion really equal? So for example, let's say you, I don't know, get a brain tumor. Who should you go to? The majority of people? Or should you go to a doctor? Whose opinion is worth something? It seems to be rather clear that the doctor knows something, and you should go to the expert. You shouldn't go to somebody who doesn't really know anything, and you really shouldn't care about the opinions of other people. You should care about the opinions of those that matter. And Socrates says, the only opinions I will respect are the good ones, from people with understanding. So for example, he says, you know, when you're training your body, should you care about what everybody says, or just the opinion of your trainer or your doctor? So you should really care about the minority opinion of those that are actually there to help you rather than a majority opinion. So if a person disobeys the individual that matters and follows those who are ignorant, what's going to happen? They're going to suffer harm. If I'm a follower of the ignorant, if I'm a follower of people that don't know what they're doing, I'm going to be harmed. If I have a problem, a physical ailment that I need a doctor for, and I don't go to a doctor to have it taken care of, I'm going to be harmed. Right? If I break my arm and I go to people who are not doctors and say, hey, this is the problem, what's going to happen? My arm is going to stay broke, it's not going to heal correctly, and I'm going to be harmed. So since he says it would be wrong to listen to the populace in matters of the body, doesn't it make even more sense to say we should listen to the expert when it comes to matters of justice? I mean, what part of the human does justice influence? So Socrates establishes with Crito that we should always do what is just and never do what is unjust. It is not okay, he says, to respond to injustice with more injustice. This is a view held by the majority, but remember what Socrates thinks about the majority. He doesn't care. He only cares about justice, right? So do we still have to be just toward the law when the law is unjust to us? This is a question that we need to consider. Do we still have to be just towards the law when the law was unjust to us? Well, what would happen if people had a choice to, violate laws when they wanted to, or if they saw that there was some sort of injustice? He says, look, if people did not follow the laws or did not follow them when it was not convenient for them to do so, what's going to happen? He says, can a city even exist without laws? If legal judgments within a city possess no force but are nullified or invalidated by individual, what happens to the city? The city becomes chaos. There would be no law and order, right? So this is a problem, right? Because in order for a city to exist and to function in a good way, there has to be laws and people have to follow the laws. So Socrates says, I have to follow the law. Even if it was unjust, I still have to do it. And he says, when you think about it, look, the law, he says, gave me, I was born under these laws, I was brought up under these laws, I was educated under these laws, and I shared in all the benefits that could be provided for you along with all the other fellow citizens. And he says, look, if I didn't think that Athens was a good place, he says, when I was an adult, I could have just left. Right? If I didn't like the laws, I could have just chosen to leave. So Socrates says, I've agreed to abide by the laws, by all the laws of Athens. All right, so now let's go and we'll talk about exile. Socrates, exile is bad too. I don't want to do that. He says, look, if I thought exile was a good punishment, if I had a chance under the laws of Athens to propose it. Remember back in the Apology, he was able to propose any punishment that they thought. And he says, I could have proposed exile. They most likely would have given it to me. But that's not what I am due. That's not what Athens owes me. And he says, look, if another problem with exile is, he goes, if I was to go to a nearby town to live, I would arrive as an enemy because I would be a subverter of laws. I would have broken the law of Athens to get to the new town. And so when you start as a resident of this new town, you're already going to start as somebody who's an outlaw. Right? In addition, historically speaking, when you look back at this case, it would show that his accusers were really right all along, that he in fact does subvert the law. And he says, we don't want that. We can't have my accusers actually be shown to be right by me just following the law whenever I feel like it. All right, another reason he says, how can he claim to value justice if he refuses to act by justice? This entire time, he cares about justice. Shouldn't he continue to act in a just way? He says, look, especially at my age, and Socrates would have been in his early 70s or so at this time, early mid-70s. He says, why should I violate the most important law just to live a few more years? He says, I don't got much time left anyways. Who cares? And what would happen to his view of justice then? If he's to be seen as a just man at all, and he escapes, then people will think that the teacher of justice did something just when in fact he didn't do anything just. People are going to see that, hey, you know what justice is? Justice is to not follow the law and just escape whenever it is convenient for you. And so now Socrates needs to take up the point about his kids and the parental obligations that Crito has put forward. He says, well, you could take your kids in exile, but Socrates says, are my children really going to be better as foreigners, or should I leave them here in Athens for what they are familiar? And besides, he says, you say that you're my friend. All of these people say that you're my friend. Why can't I rely on my friends to help raise my kids? Right? When I'm gone. If you were truly friends in the first place, you would help care for the children after he dies. All right, so those are some of the responses he gives. Let's go ahead and list out these responses. So number one, public opinion is not important to any decision. The many are ignorant, and it does not allow them to have any sort of true choice, and therefore their opinions are of no value to the one who strives after truth and the good. The essential concern is whether to escape would be just, but one should never do an injustice, because doing evil to humans leads to what? More injustice. And he says, men, especially as old as Socrates, should not fear death. All right. The last argument I want to put forward is what we often call the laws argument. And it goes like this. So the laws are more honorable, he says, than one's parents, for they too beget, educate, and nurture their citizens. So just as one should respect the decision of one's parents, so one should respect the decision of the laws, but to an even greater degree. The law is more important than the law of the parents. There is confusion as to whether this respect is due to the laws or due to the fatherland. So Socrates tacitly agrees to obey the laws by remaining in Athens after reaching maturity, witnessing how the laws are structured and how they work, and by having raised his children in Athens too. So Socrates says, I chose to live here, and by choosing to live here, I have chosen to abide by the laws. In fact, there's a sort of social contract which is implicitly made. I live here, I follow the laws. Right? There's this contract that's been made. So it would be unjust to break that kind of contract. Socrates, of course, would be seen as a corrupting force wherever he went. And he says if one has the ability to choose whether to obey a law, then he's destroying the power of law. Destroying law is unjust, for men require a community, and a community requires laws. The other problem is that it's going to put him in a very precarious position in the afterlife. All right, so, you know, Crito's upset. He wants to get Socrates away. He wants to save Socrates' life. Socrates gives all sorts of reasons for why any attempt of him leaving is going to be unjust. And so, you know, it's not something that he would do. All right, so think about that for just a bit. I mean, how many of you would do that? How many of you value justice to such a degree that you would give your life? You would sacrifice your life for it. Socrates is a very different kind of individual. He's a very unique individual. Justice and doing right is what's important. Understanding what is right is an issue of knowledge for Socrates. And if you know what is right, you are attracted to what is right. You are attracted to justice. A just man is attracted to justice. And so if you want to be considered a just man and have the benefits of being a just man, such as maybe going to an afterlife that you will benefit from, he says you have to do just and never injustice. All right. So that's the Crito in a nutshell. I hope you like it. It's a really important piece of political philosophy, especially with regards to social contract and what the relationship should be between the individual and the state. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. Until next time, have a good day.